Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. As you can gather, it's rather cold in Nairobi at the moment. It's about 8 to 10 degrees, but it feels a lot colder because of the high altitude. And it's quite chilly at night, and hence the sweater. Let me start with some macro thoughts. A cryptocurrency exchange hack in South Korea has fueled a $46 billion rout and extended this year's Bitcoin slump to more than 50%. We're last trading at around 6,750. The key area where we did get a bounce previously was 6,200, so that's where we've got to keep an eye out on things. I think we'll probably go down and test those levels. Home thoughts. I couldn't resist this quote in the Wall Street Journal in an article about Abraj Group, and they were quoting its founder, CEO, Arif Naqvi, who said this: "Today's peacock is tomorrow's feather duster." Powerful, isn't it? I like this photograph, riding safari adrift in a sea of sand, this sublime Namib, seeing Namibia differently. And then a very interesting article in the Atlantic, the Icelandic families tracking climate change with measuring tape. I thought you can't get to two different extremities in this world of ours, the Namib Desert to Iceland. Political reflections, it's happening faster than expected. Next year, people will spend more time online than they will be watching television. That's a first. That's certainly an interesting development. And I think it also speaks to the fragmentation of narrative control. Jong Un has arrived in Singapore for a summit with President Trump. That was yesterday on Sky News. And we've subsequently learned President Trump has arrived as well. Bloomberg asks, giving up nukes will likely be high on the Trump-Kim summit agenda. And I take you back to something I wrote on the 30th of April when I said, so my question remains, what security guarantees can Trump provide to Kim that convince him to denuclearize? And the question remains as follows. Jong Un can hardly forget what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, both of whom met their ends after being defanged. So my question remains, what security guarantees can Trump provide to Kim that convince him to denuclearize? Offering up bulletproof security guarantees is the equivalent of threading the needle. That's a fact. Angela Merkel's office released this photo taken at the G7, which tells you a lot about how things went. Fantastic thread interpreting that photograph from T. Fletcher. That link is on Rich Wrap-Ups as well. He tweets, this photo has rightly caught our attention, partly the anger and frustration that Angela Merkel's team must have felt in order to tweet it, but more because it captures a moment of great jeopardy, a moment of despair and sadness in Western capitals, including Washington, of incredulous laughter in Moscow, of relief for the world's tyrants and despots, of reluctant acceptance that while we were busy building driverless cars, we ended up with a driverless world. I thought that was powerful as well. Well worth reading the entire series of tweets. In a matter of seconds, you can destroy trust with 280 Twitter characters. Angry Trump torpedoed the G7's global world trade order. The president lashed out at Canadian Prime Minister for making false statements, while key advisors accused Trudeau of backstabbing. And the G7 was certainly in disarray after Trump rejected the communique and attacked a weak Justin Trudeau, called him dishonest and weak, arrived at the summit in Canada, left early to fly to Singapore, nevertheless appeared to agree a form of words on contentious issues, news thanks to an all-night negotiating session by officials from all sides. But after leaving for Singapore, Trump tweeted personal attacks on Trudeau and said that he had told his representatives not to sign the summit communique, turning what had already been a tense meeting of the world's leading industrialized democracies into a fiasco. PM Justin Trudeau acted so meek and mild, he tweeted, only to give a news conference after I left, saying that US tariffs were kind of insulting and he will not be pushed around. Very dishonest and weak, he claimed. Even for a presidency as capricious as Trump's, his action marked a new blurring of lines between his personal feelings towards other leaders and US government policy. A few minutes before Trump sent out his inflammatory tweets, his hawkish National Security Advisor John Bolton appeared to anticipate them by sending a tweet of his own, deriding the G7 summit he had just attended. Just another G7 where the countries expect America will always be their bank. The president made it clear today, no more. Tweets were a blow, of course, to the French President Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Trudeau was visibly upset, and he said there will not be a sunset clause. We cannot sign a trade deal that expires automatically every 5 years. So really an extraordinary G7. The President also spoke about letting Vladimir Putin back in. And then, if you follow what is the response, when the village idiot spoils your traps and upturns your syrup buckets, invite him to dinner, fill his body with venison, rye whiskey and butter tarts until the goose fat glistens on his chin, then set him on the porch, affront the bears you lured to the yard. He was one. Macron called out Trump, you're not comfortable with an agreement signed by your predecessor, maybe just because it was signed by your predecessor, which is something I've also said before. But don't stop others from respecting it. Lagarde in this photograph is seen staring at Trump as he turned up late at the G7 gender equality session. Both Xi and Putin have been surprised and shocked by the rapidity of US's decline. This is in an article in Axios. And I think, they couldn't have prayed for a more extraordinary outcome in their favor than they're getting at the moment. Syria did not register on the global conscience. This is something I learned at the TEDx event in the Kakuma camp. I'll come to that in a moment. But apparently, according to Professor Paul Slavik, Syria did not register until this photo in 2015. And it was a very iconic photo. Daily Mail has an interview with Assad. How, I ask Assad, would he like to be remembered in history? He said, it depends on which history. The Western history, it's going to tell lies and lies and lies. Our history, I hope, will remember me as somebody who fought terrorists to save his country. And that was my duty as president. There's much more detail about what his thinking is. Saudi Arabia and the two Persian Gulf nations have pledged $2.5 billion to help support Jordan's economy. I put in brackets, if not them, then whom? Currency markets, euro-dollars put in a bit of a recovery, 118.07, dollar index 93.46, Japanese yen at 110.02. Swiss franc 0.9867, the pound 134.25, the Australian dollar is at 0.7610, India rupee 67.355, South Korean won 1074.86, the real has bounced a little to 370.93. The Egyptian pound 17.8617, that's performing reasonably well, and the rand, which was sold very aggressively on Friday, has recovered a little bit to 13.0180. Dollar index, this is a 3-month chart, after we hit 94.50, which was my objective. I haven't haven't seen anything which is telling me which way we're going definitively. Euro dollar back at 118.08, bouncing a little bit off the lows that we saw earlier this month. Gold last trading at 1297.25. That has not been able to regain $1,300 for quite some time. Crude oil $65.45 a barrel in New York. Doesn't feel as frothy as it was trading previously. Emerging market money managers are tiptoeing into Monday, says Bloomberg, after what has been a brutal sell-off. Sub-Saharan Africa thanking the ladies who cooked iftar for me in my constituency, Bumbuli, yesterday. That is January Makamba, who was a very accomplished guest on Mindspeak, you will recall, in Dar es Salaam. And this is another photograph from Bumbuli, Lushoto, Tanzania. And in fact, this is where a number of people who worked with us when we were in Mombasa actually came from. Nelson Chamisa rides a bike in Cheretse today ahead of a rally this afternoon. Man of the people. I attended this TEDx event at the Kakuma refugee camp, and Mercy Akwot showed this painting about South Sudan. Apparently the painting is by Ria Yuyada. People are dying, we are tired. It's such a shame. I remember the huge optimism on the day of 2011 of independence. Rwanda courts Russia and China's ties with America deteriorate. He's moving quickly. Met with Sergei Lavrov, he's met with Trudeau. He's an extremely sharp operator, President Kagame. A credible offer to end the war with Eritrea and the opening up of state companies to private capital are Ethiopia's biggest strategic shifts in over a decade. We've been speaking about that last week. And look at this Sunday's paper in Addis Ababa, was talking all about austerity. First it was Argentina, then came Turkey and Brazil. Now it's South Africa's turn to reel. South Africa's rand extended its slump after passing 13 to the dollar for the first time since December, and then blew all the way up, as it's wont to do. It's back at 13.0180. South African all shares down 2.15% so far this year. Crisis looming, asks MoneyWeb. The rand dropped 13.28 against the dollar on Friday. It's weaker since December the 18th. Egyptian pound holding its own at 17.8617. Nigerian all shares up 1.11% year to date. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 17.78% year to date. Thousands rallied in Kinshasa for a video link with the exiled Congo politician Moishi Katumbi. He's got to get back into the country first of all. Katumbi is a millionaire businessman from the Katanga province, in exile since May 2016. I will return to Congo to end the suffering of the Congolese people, he told a rally. He's got to get back first. In a rare opinion poll published by New York University's Congo Research Group in March, Katumbi came out as the most popular of Congo's hypothetical presidential candidates, with 24% saying they would vote for him, followed by 13% for Tshisekedi. The same poll found 80% had a negative view of Kabila. Well, Kabila's used to that. Africans fleeing war top list of world's most neglected, says Amnesty. 6 of the world's 10 most neglected crises are in Africa, where conflict has uprooted millions of people. The Norwegian Refugee Council. DRC, where years of civil war have led more than 5 million people to flee their homes, topped the NRC's annual list this year. South Sudan, Burundi, Ethiopia, Central African Republic and Nigeria also featured. Conflicts in Africa, said, were viewed differently. Many displaced from these countries do not end up as refugees in the Mediterranean and are not visible for us in the north. So these crises get too little diplomatic and media attention. 65 million people globally have been uprooted from their homes and forced to seek safety and shelter elsewhere. Sub-Saharan Africa recorded an average hotel occupancy of 60% in 2017, according to Saiton. So my big thing was on Saturday, I took myself off to the Kakuma refugee camp, which is in Kakuma. In the morning I met up with Philip Ogola, Telga Larupe, and the Star's cartoonist Victor Ndula. Posted this photograph as we got on the plane. And my piece over the weekend was about this visit. Raouf Mazou of UNHCR, who is a friend and deep thinker, has always subtly jolted the way I looked at things. And whilst I was visiting London, I received a media invite to visit the Kakuma refugee camp for a TEDx event. The starring cast featured the mesmerizing slam poet Emi Mahmood, Mary Maker, 24-year-old filmmaker Amina Ruimo from the Congo, Georgina Goodwin, the photographer, who says she's making the invisible people visible, Apurva Sanghi, the World Bank economist who worked on a report about this camp from a refugee-nomics perspective. Yes, in my backyard, playing on the word NIMBY, not in my backyard. The economics of refugees and their social dynamics in Kakuma. Governor Nanok, who's quite cerebral and controlled, the hijabi supermodel Halima Aden, and so many more. The flight took 90 minutes from Wilson Airport, which is a magic portal into so many other worlds. And as we drove through the town to the camp and I looked out at the passing landscape, it was green. You could see the residue left by the flash floods, and dotting the landscape tall, angular figures and lots of children, none of whom had their hand out, none. To Kenya's credit, and the likes of UNHCR, which has done the heavy lifting, Kenya is the second largest refugee hosting country in Africa. 500,000 registered refugees hosted by Kenya, 32% are housed in the Kakuma refugee camp, 57% in Dadaab refugee settlement, and 11% in Nairobi. Kakuma refugee camp is located in Turkana County and is at the crossroads of Ethiopia, South Sudan and Uganda, and is home to 190,822 refugees, with South Sudanese making up the majority, 52% of the camp's population. The camp is also home to refugees from Somalia, Ethiopia, Burundi, Rwanda and the DR Congo. Since its establishment in 1992, Kakuma has hosted one of the longest-lasting refugee camps in the world. Kakuma camp was founded when in 1991 some 10,000 Sudanese boys walked into northern Kenya. Having first fled civil war in southern Sudan, undertaking a treacherous journey to Ethiopia, war once again forced them to seek refuge elsewhere. They had walked more than 1,000 miles before reaching Kenya, and Kakuma refugee camp would become their new home. Last week I learned that 1 out of every 100 of us is a refugee, and displacement worldwide is at an all-time high. Kathleen Johnston said, "The only real power in this world is the ability to control the dominant narrative about what's going on. In the West, the refugee narrative has been weaponized, and the consequences of that weaponization is there for all to see." Note Nigel Farage and his Brexit advert with an endless line of refugees queuing to enter Britain. Note the resurgence of the far right. Note Orban and his language of existential threat by the Islamic hordes. The linguistics around refugees has become as much of a rat-a-tat machine gun as it was for many of those folks who were forced to flee at the point of a gun. Interestingly, Mr. Octopizzo identified this linguistic straitjacket and sought to break it with the characterization of his intervention as Refugenius Project, and there was plenty of Refugenius at Saturday's TEDx event. As you probably know, Turkana County is in the bottom percentile when it comes to most economic indicators, though excitement has built over the recent oil finds and even aquifer discoveries. And this is taking me to another observation. It seems to me where the disparity between the host community, and the refugee community is at its narrowest, the net add is a lot easier to absorb. It actually produces a measurable net positive gain, according to the Yes in My Backyard report. The gross regional product of the Turkana region increased permanently by 3.4% as a result of the refugee presence. Importantly, this increase is permanent. The effect on overall employment is also positive. Total employment increased by 2.9%. And finally, in per capita terms, though the magnitude is not big, the GRI per local person in Turkana also increases by 0.5%. These results put together suggest the refugee presence has a beneficial impact on Turkana's economy. The report measures the Kakuma economy at $56 million and therefore concludes refugees have created more boom than gloom. I did not see many adult refugee males. I saw many mothers and sub-adult children. I heard Thibaut Rollet of Safaricom describe how they dropped in some super base station from the sky for the weekend into this most remote part of the world, and I thought to myself, just network these folks and see what happens. I would be a big buyer of that $56 million GDP number. I'm grateful to UNHCR for taking me to visit a part of Kenya. I'd flown over at 35,000 feet but never set foot in. It was an eye-opener. Most of all, if it's resilience and a never say die attitude you're after, it's right here under our noses. So it was very good to see Rauf Mazou, who's a friend, at this event. Reuters have written a great article, Poets and Models Star at World's First Refugee Camp TEDx event in Kenya. Refugees turned poets, filmmakers, models and teachers sought to shatter stereotypes and inspire a global audience on Saturday by sharing their stories of perseverance through suffering. The world's first TEDx event to be hosted in a refugee camp. Speakers included activist Ria William Uyada, athlete Poor BL, and teacher Mary Nirak Maker from South Sudan, Congolese filmmaker Amina Rubino, and Sudanese poet Emi Mahmoud. Somali-American Halima Aydin, international fashion model, also featured. I want you to remember that although the children here are refugees, they are children, Aydin said. They deserve every opportunity to flourish, to hope, to dream, to be successful, she added. My story began here in Kakuma refugee camp, a place of hope. There are 2,000 businesses in and around the camp. This is a photograph of Governor Nanok, who I described as cerebral. The report, Yes in My Backyard, The Economics of Refugees and Their Social Dynamics in Kakuma, Kenya, is also linked on Rich Wrap-Ups, and there's a lot of content and detail in it. The Kenya shilling appreciated 0.7% against the US dollar to close at 100.8 from 101.6 the previous week. This is all about inward remittances, which have surged year on year. For example, diaspora remittances increased to 56.6% to $217 million in April versus $138.6 million in March 2017. That's from Saiton. Eurobond yields climbed. 10-year and 30-year Eurobonds increased by 30 and 10 basis points to 7.4 and 8.4% respectively. The Nairobi all-share, all the indices performed at the back end of last week. The Nairobi all-share is up 3.2% this year, but it's down 10.124% since hitting a record high on April 5. NSE 20 is down 9.67% year to date. The German-based insurance company Allianz Groups is set to acquire an 8% minority stake in Africa Reinsurance for an agreed sum of 69 million euros. Kenya will be issuing its national budget for the fiscal year 2018-2019, projected to be 2.5 trillion shillings on June the 14th. Here's a chart of private sector credit growth via Saiton, which really explains a lot around our economy at this point in time. There is no credit.